Good morning. This is Ellen Thorpe, Executive Director of National Women in Roofing. We have a webinar today, the Multi-Generational Workforce, being presented by the National Women in Roofing Education Committee and also members of RCI Incorporated, a professional society of roofing and building envelope consultants. We'll be getting started in just a minute. Good morning. This is Ellen Thorpe, Executive Director of National Women in Roofing. Thank you for joining us today for a webinar on the multi-generational workforce being put together by the Education Committee of National Women in Roofing and also including members of RCI. To start us off, we owe a big thanks to our diamond sponsors, Johns Manville, SRS Distribution, the Roofing Industry Alliance for Progress, Tamco Building Products, and Tremco Roofing and Building Maintenance. They are responsible for so much of what we do and also the sponsors of National Women in Roofing Day, scheduled for February 9th in Nashville, immediately preceding the IRE. Our founding sponsors have been with us from the very beginning, providing significant seed money to National Women in Roofing. And that tradition of support continues with our platinum sponsors. These companies not only talk the talk, but they walk the walk when it comes to empowering women in the roofing industry. National Women in Roofing recently established a program of affiliate relationships with other organizations where we are able to identify mutual areas of cooperation and support. RCI was the first National Women in Roofing affiliate, and the webinar today is one of several areas in which we are looking to work together to empower women in the roofing industry. And now I'd like to introduce our presenters for today's webinar. Jennifer Keegan is the Director of Building and Roofing Science at GAF. She has over 20 years of experience as a building enclosure consultant. She provides technical leadership within the industry through the ASTM D08, Committee on Roofing and Waterproofing, and as an advocate for women within the industry as the Education Chair for National Women in Roofing and a board member of Women in Construction. She strives to be a good role model personally and professionally for her two teenage daughters and hopes some of today's takeaways will help improve her communication skills with this rising generation. Kayla Schlicker has been with the Duralast sales team for almost 3 years. Prior to roofing, Kayla had been in the construction industry as a project manager for a general construction design build firm. Kayla is also an active member of the Education Committee, stepping into the secretary position. She enjoys spending her time off the roof with her boys, Lucas and Espen, and looks forward to her newest addition, a daughter, in February. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer and Kayla. But first, I'd like to remind attendees that you can submit questions throughout the webinar using the little questions widget that's on the right-hand side of your screen. Jennifer?
It's actually Kayla, and thank you, Ellen. I'd just like to go through the objectives of today's webinar, and those are to understand the circumstances, attitudes, and values that influence each generation, review the differences in skill sets, highlight the strengths of each generation, and outline tools to leverage generational differences in our professional relationships. And then we're going to also talk about tips to harness the power of successful multi-generational teams. Jennifer?
Let's see, Jennifer, are you with us?
Yes, I'm sorry, I was on mute. I apologize. I
Every
am
time.
going to introduce our first three panelists, who are all from RCI. Wanda Edwards is a baby boomer, the Senior Director of Technical Services at RCI. Now, prior to joining RCI, she served as the Director of Code Development for the Institute of Business and Home Safety. Previously, she served as Deputy Commissioner of Chief Engineer for the Engineering Division of North Carolina's Department of Insurance, whose responsibilities included administration regulation of building codes. She's a Fulbright Scholar, and she earned her bachelor's degree in civil engineering and architecture from North Carolina State University. She's a licensed professional engineer, and she serves on various committees within ASTM, ICC, and NIBS. And in 2017, RCI awarded her the Herbert Bershing Award. Julie McDonald is a millennial, and she has been in the construction and building envelope consulting industry for over 10 years. As a branch manager of the Denver office and a senior project manager for Building Envelope Consulting, LLC, Julie's directly involved with sales and marketing for the company, as well as networking and client development. She's technical services include commissioning, envelope and roof consulting, and quality assurance and testing services. She's a registered exterior wall consultant through RCI and a master's degree in construction management from Purdue University. She's also the chair of RCI's Emerging Professional Committee and serves on their Technical Advisory Committee. And last but not least, we have Stephanie Williams, who's straddling the millennial Gen Edger fence, and she's a young professional at Wishtani Elsner Associates in California. Having just graduated as a Bachelor of Architecture from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, where she was a student member of RCI, she began her career just last year in June. Being interested in both architecture and engineering and attention to detail, she found her place at Wishtani and has been an active member of several professional committees, including a LEED Green Associate, and she's currently pursuing her LEED AP accreditation. So Kayla, if you could introduce our next panelist.
Our next panelist is George Smith, a traditionalist/baby boomer. He was the vice president for FM approvals for over 30 years. He manages the building materials group within North America and assigned engineering staff in Asia and Europe. He was responsible for business growth of the building materials certification business. Today he is quote unquote retired and still serving the roofing industry as the chairman of ASTM D08 and a consultant. Lindsay Monken is a Gen Edger. She'll graduate from the Stevens Institute of Technology in May with an undergraduate degree in chemical engineering and a graduate degree in engineering management. She started working for GAF in the summer of 2017 as an intern and co-op student with the research and development team. As she enters her final semester, she will be working part-time with GAF supply chain teams to learn more about logistics and other factors that relate to her graduate degree. Julie Palmer is a millennial and is a commercial territory sales manager for GAF, working closely with the design professionals and building owners to provide roof assembly solutions. Before joining the sales team, she was part of the product certifications and customer care teams at GAF. Julie has a degree in psychology and criminal justice from Rutgers University. And last but not least, Leslie Franklin is a Gen Xer. She is the Vice President of Brand Marketing and responsible for the development and execution of multi-channel brand marketing programs at GAF. During her 8 years with GAF, she has held various levels of product marketing responsibility, most recently Executive Director of Residential Marketing. She has an undergraduate degree in electrical engineering from the University of Illinois and an MBA from Kellogg School of Management.
Thanks,
Jennifer?
Kayla. So currently, we have 5 generations in our workforce: traditionalists, boomers, Gen Xers, millennials, and Gen Edgers. The millennials outnumber the boomers in our workplace. The boomers, Gen Xers, and millennials are vying for influence without consensus about work ethic or efficacy. Age and experience no longer indicate role. 1 in 3 employees reports to someone younger than them, and 1 in 7 reports to someone a full decade younger to them. The new generation, Gen Z, or the Gen Edgers, are just entering our workforce at a rate of 4.5 million per year. Traditionalists see these changes and hope that all they've worked so hard to create isn't lost to these new generations, running the business in a dramatically different way. Now, in this dynamic setting, how do these generations actually relate? Which generations work together well, and which are conflict prone? Finally, how do these shifts impact you? So let's talk about our 5 generations. So traditionalists, also known as the Depression babies, and those who invested so much of themselves into the business that they can't seem to retire and can still be seen in the office a few days a week. Boomers, also known as the Me generation, the Gen Xers, also the Lost generation, Generation Y, also the Millennials, and the latest generation to enter the workforce, Gen Z, or the Gen Edgers. These are the generations that make up today's workforce. And Kayla and I will walk you through the circumstances in which each of these 5 generations grew up and their collective traits. The traditionalists came of age in hard times and then created one of the most prosperous economies of all times. They lived through the Great Depression and fought the Great Wars. They were the foundation of a better country and were full of patriotism, honor, love of home and family, and a very strong work ethic. This generation was and continues to be focused on history, understanding that the past must be remembered rather than repeated. They're veterans that believe in law and order, in respect for leadership, and in personal duty. The baby boomers came into the world focused on them. Doting parents, stay-at-home mothers, and hardworking fathers wanted to give their children every opportunity for a better life. The country poured money into building schools and park facilities for this generation. The children of the boomer age grew up believing they could accomplish anything, go anywhere, and change the world. We saw the hippie movement, women's liberation, the sexual revolution, and the anti-war political activities. And these all came from the boomers at the onset of their adulthood. Kayla?
Generation Xers have been something of a lost group from birth. This was the first generation born to working mothers whose careers were interrupted only long enough to give birth and find the proper daycare system. Raised by dual income or single parents, Xers were the first American generation to fully expect women to have lifelong careers. The Xers learned self-reliance early as they shuttled from daycare to school to after-school activities to latchkey loneliness. They saw the Berlin Wall fall and watched the Gulf War start live on TV and the Challenger explode in front of their eyes. They saw the onset of AIDS and missing children's faces appeared on their milk cartons. They grew up cautious and skeptical of the world around them. Millennials grew up with technology and they rely on it to perform their jobs better. Armed with smartphones, laptops, and other gadgets, this generation is plugged in 24/7. The fast-track lifestyle has lost much of its appeal for millennials. The members of this generation are willing to trade high pay for fewer billable hours, flexible schedules, and thus a better work-life balance. Millennials are confident, ambitious, and achievement-oriented. They also have high expectations of their partners, tend to seek new challenges at work, and aren't afraid to question authority. They seek meaningful work and a solid learning curve. They've also been called the Peter Pan or boomerang generation because of the propensity of some to move back in with their parents, perhaps due to economic constraints, and a growing tendency to delay some of the typical adulthood rites of passage like marriage or starting a career. And the Gen Edgers are the most underestimated generation thus far. They are otherwise known as the Snapchat-based, smartphone-addicted kids that are too wrapped up in Pokemon Go. They grew up with mobile technology, so they're fluent in this language. They're more cautious and careful. After all, they grew up after 9/11 and the global financial crisis. But they're surprisingly serious about their careers. They prioritize purpose over paycheck and are true believers in the potential for overnight success with an entrepreneurial spirit that dominates over 60% of this generation.
But Kayla, let's call it like we see it. Generations are just one lens that we can use to find clues to people's preferences and behaviors. It's important to remember that this is just one part of someone's identity. We're all individuals, and being born in a certain age demographic does not guarantee anything. Perhaps you identify with an adjacent generation more so than your own. Perhaps you totally reject the stereotypes of your generation, and that's okay. We're all unique, and this insight is simply here to help us understand the scenarios that influence the generations before and after us. If we understand one another, it's easier to find common ground.
Speaking of stereotypes, let's just call them out. Traditionalists are old-fashioned, rigid, adverse to change. Boomers are proud workaholics, they're unrealistic, and they own property. Gen Xers are impatient, cynical, skeptical. They have a lot of debt. And millennials are spoiled, distracted, entitled, and disrespectful. They own their shares in Google. Gen Xers might be bargain hunters, individuals, and entrepreneurs. They connect only through technology, and they'll own Bitcoin if they don't already. So let's hear what our panelists have to say about stereotypes. Let's start with what challenges have you experienced in working with different generations, and how do those generational differences impact your relationship and interactions with team members, clients, vendors, all of the above? Wanda?
From my experience, younger employees want more flexibility in their work schedule and their work environment. My generation clocked in at 8 o'clock every morning and stayed in the office until the end of the day. I'm seeing a shift to flexible working hours and working from home. I'm told younger people like a more open work environment, which is contrary to my sensibilities. I like having a private office and would find it difficult to work in an open environment. I think the younger generation wants and demands a more balanced life between work and home. I'm also aware of different communication styles that have evolved into more texting and email versus the telephone. So I've had to adjust my communication styles as well. I think this generation, the newer generations, will change jobs more frequently than my generation did, as they're constantly looking for new challenges in their workplace.
Leslie, do you have anything to add to that?
I do. First off, I wouldn't really frame working with different generations as a challenge. Instead, I'd look at this as an opportunity to interact and get new, different, and fresh ideas. That's because different generations bring different experiences and perspectives that I think end up in a better outcome. Generational differences force us to do what we should do. I think appreciate that everyone doesn't have your same understanding of a situation or the same solution to a problem, and that by taking multiple perspectives into account, you're naturally more empathetic in your approach, and that enables you to come up with much more creative solutions.
Thanks, Leslie. Julie, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, to build on what Leslie said about the opportunity, I very much agree with that. A multi-generational workforce provides more diversity. There's more sharing of ideas, but most importantly, succession planning. I know I've been a RCI member for a number of years, and in our industry, like 75% of the workforce is older than me. And one point that I would say about being a millennial, and I'm sure a lot of other millennials and panelists will agree, we don't stereotype, or we don't identify as the millennial stereotype of just kind of being self-centered or tech-savvy. I don't consider myself to be the most tech-savvy person. I would also say that at my point in my career, I'm no longer fresh, but I'm not considered seasoned. And I would say that it took me until I hit that 10-year point in the field before I felt like I had credibility as a consultant. So in this field in particular, having more years under your belt is a benefit. There's seasoned consultants that often say, I've been doing this for 30 years, but the industry is continually changing. So I think one of the benefits of being a Gen Edger is that they're learning the current technologies and the way that buildings will be built so they can diagnose them in 20 or 30 years. So I'm a slight disadvantage. I don't know how buildings were built 30 years ago, and I'm also a little bit behind of learning the current technologies, but that's why we do continuing education. So those are some of the challenges and opportunities with working in a multi-generational workforce.
Some good insight, Julie. George, what do you have to say about it?
George, I think you.
There we go.
Hi, George.
All right. Hello. I think that the challenge in working with a diverse group is the language that's used. I think we have to be clear with our communication. I think we have to be sure that each member of the team has a good understanding of where we're going and what the path is to success, because I believe from the very beginning the communication is the most important aspect of the success of any project or any team. I also think that everyone on the team needs to own it, and I find that some generational differences exist in terms of ownership of a goal or an objective. So I think that clear, concise communication and ownership of objectives and tasks are the most important aspect of a multi-generational group, and that almost assures success when you have good communication and when you take ownership of the task at hand.
Let's jump from our baby boomer to the other end of the spectrum and hear from our Gen Edger, Lindsay.
Hi. So I like one of the things that Julie said and how she doesn't feel like she's completely tied to her stereotype of being like super tech savvy, which I kind of agree with. I think similar to George that communication can be very difficult when working with different generations because it has evolved so much. And even though I'm a Gen Edger, I like that face-to-face, one-on-one communication tactic as opposed to, contacting someone via email, then text, then phone call, then you see them face-to-face. There's a lot of different portals, and it could make people very unorganized or eliminate some people in a group project, maybe if you're just talking to one person as opposed to the entire group. The communication tools that have been developed over the years, I feel like they could be very beneficial, but if they're not utilized in a super organized manner, I think that it could make different generations or just different people in general miss something because they're moving too quick or just not have a streamlined method of what goals we need to accomplish, similar to what George said.
Thank you. That was some great insight. So if we were comparing generations, this is really a reliable way to provoke an argument. Members of one generation are apt to criticize the failings of another and be blind to their own. Comparing an older generation to the newer generation may lead us to mistake differences in maturity for generational effects. The one study looks at baby boomers, millennials, and Gen Xers, each when they were 18 years old. What they found is that most of the differences were small and subtle, summarizing that the generational differences in work value are exaggerated. Millennial stereotypes include unclipped ambition, hedonism, and laziness. However, if boomers and Gen Xers compare millennials to how they were at 18, those stereotypes largely dissolve. And this was as true 2,500 years ago as it is today. As Socrates said, the children now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect for elders and love chatter in place of exercise. Allegedly, nothing changed.
Instead of focusing on comparing the generations, let's focus on what we have in common. There are a few things that we all want in our careers: respect, to be heard, appreciation, clear expectations, to feel connected to the business, and opportunity and have the opportunity to impact the bottom line. Instead of talking about other generations, talk to each other. Ask respectful questions and listen with an open mind. Try to connect on the human level.
Let's go back to our panelists. And we'll start with Julie Palmer. What do you admire most about another generation? What do they bring to the workplace that complements or perhaps disrupts your generation?
So I work in the field for commercial roofing, and I admire, I suppose, mostly about the baby boomer generation. A lot of these gentlemen own their own company or have been partnered with their company for many, many years. They're all very hands-on, very passionate, and they stay very involved in the day-to-day. They're not ones to delegate, and in my generation and younger generations, I feel like there's a lot of my project versus your project, while with them, it all seems that they're involved in everything that's going on. So I admire that a lot about them.
Thanks, Julie. How about you, Stephanie?
I often find myself learning from the more experienced generations, the traditionalists, the boomers, the Gen Xers, and older millennials are who I learn from most often. What I admire most about them are their ease of technical expertise and their ease of mentoring others with that technical knowledge. I also really appreciate their in-field approach to work because there's so much to learn from being on site and experiencing that hands-on.
Thanks, Stephanie. How about you, Leslie?
Well, I think that millennials get a bad rap. So the generation that I wanted to say I admired something about is millennials. I think they have lots of admirable qualities. One thing that stands out to me is the deep connection that millennials have with brands. They look through things from a different lens. They focus on corporate responsibility. They're also very direct, and they're willing to think out of the box and try new approaches to things. All of these things are qualities that complement my generation. But I also wanted to speak out for my generation, the Gen Xers. I think we have drive, focus, experience on our side, and hope, which is a key attribute. Gen Xers are a generation that we're pulled in many different directions, but I think we have the ability to pull together for a common cause or purpose and really rise to the occasion.
Thanks, Leslie. And shifting gears to our Gen Edger focus, Lindsay, what would you share with us?
So I definitely agree with Stephanie in appreciating the technical knowledge that older generations have. One thing I really admire is how much they did to learn engineering practices without the aid of a computer or a smartphone. I think that simple engineering basics can be overlooked from learning using fancy new applications or programs. And there's definitely something special in learning by studying from a physical book or hand drawing a system. And I almost wish that this was pushed a little bit more at my university, despite advances in technology. But I definitely think that I could see older generations and younger generations meshing really well when tackling projects, because the older generations may have really like nitty-gritty technical knowledge, whereas the younger generations can be able to apply this to maybe a newer program or system that may not have been available to older generations.
Thanks, Lindsay. And now from one engineer to another at opposite ends of the spectrum, Wanda, can you share your thoughts with us?
Yes, I have a great admiration for all the younger generations. I find that they're far more self-assured and assertive than my generation was. My generation was raised to be seen and not heard. So it made it very difficult when transitioning to the workplace to change that attitude. There also was the mindset that you had to do your time before you'd earned the opportunity to speak and offer. And I'm so glad that people now feel like they have something to offer, they have a value, and they aren't afraid to speak out and participate.
Thanks, ladies.
Great insight. And we've talked about stereotypes and what we admire about each generation. Through these discussions, we've acknowledged that each generation brings something different to the table. Generation Z, they're a culture of interactivity. They're keen on labor mobility and highly aware about and vocal about social issues. Baby boomers are critical and selective. They're digital natives and they're self-taught online. Millennials are open-minded regarding diversity. They're word citizens and they're competitive. And Generation X, they have a great dedication to their work, the ability to forge a career, and they're committed. And then the traditionalists, the baby boomers, they have extensive experience, loyal to the companies they work for, and they appreciate sacrifice. Let's jump back over to our panelists and hear how they leverage these contributions to either embrace or overcome differences between the generations. Let's start with our traditionalist / baby boomer, George.
Yeah, unmute myself. I think I have two very important issues. I think I have two things that we all can do. And the first is listen. That is, listen to your teammates, to your colleagues. Learn from them. Learn their view of the world and why they do the things they do, and how successful they might be. The second one, which is in my mind the most important, have fun with it. That is, it's a job. It takes a lot of your life, and it's way, way too much time to not have fun with it. Everybody that has fun with their job routinely will do better at solving problems and gaining success. So my two messages: listen to your colleagues and your friends, and have some fun with everything you do at work.
Thanks, George. Julie McDonald, how about you?
Hi. I think one of the most obvious tools that I leverage is physical ability. There are things that we do in the field as consultants now that, say, like the owner of my company, who is a baby boomer, is no longer physically able to do, or shall I say, willing to do, crawling in crawl spaces, carrying heavy equipment, walking roofs for 8 hours a day, where our Gen Edgers and our younger millennials have the physical ability to do that. So that has been a good leverage between generations in my own company of playing to different physical abilities and skills. And the second thing has just been the ability to mentor and train. So the young folks need mentoring and training so that they can reach the level where we are now. And then the owner, or like myself, we need to train them and rise them amongst the ranks so that we can someday retire and leave behind a successful company. And then one tool that we use a lot to kind of help overcome the physical and geographical challenges is just the simple use of FaceTime on our iPhones, of being able, if our technicians have a question, they don't understand what they're looking at, they can give us a FaceTime call where, we can answer questions in minutes rather than wait till we come back, download photos, have this long-winded discussion, have an email thread. We can solve field issues a lot more quickly and provide senior technical assistance without that person having to be on site. So those are a couple of things that we are leveraging to kind of work between our generations.
That was great, Julie. Lindsay, how about you?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Julie in really growing a collaborative culture. When there's a bunch of different generations, growing a collaborative culture can embrace perspectives that I may not have prior to meeting with people that are maybe older than me or from different generations. And I think that it's really important to embrace each other's different perspectives. And then I know I mentioned a difficulty in maybe communication. I think it's really important if we all maintain a collaborative culture, we're able to, help each other out in areas where I may struggle or an older generation may struggle. And I think that a collaborative culture can really help also keep and maintain accountability for each person in a group and make sure that everyone knows exactly what they're doing. So I think collaborative culture is definitely how I think that different generations can overcome differences.
Going from one edge of the spectrum with our Gen Edger to our baby boomer, let's hear from Wanda.
I think we have to be more sensitive to the fact that the work landscape is changing, and we have to be more flexible to adapt and respond to what younger people want from their jobs. Rather than trying to force them to conform to our world, we need to learn more about what their needs and wants are and work to provide that for them. If we want to retain employees, we have to be able to give them more of what they expect in their workplace. The challenge is for older employees to reach out to younger employees and explore their goals and needs.
I think we may have lost Wanda. Julie Palmer, do you have anything to add?
Yes. So personally, I like to leverage my stereotype as a millennial to be the tech support. It's never something that's come easy, although the stereotype says it does. But I like to be able to assist my baby boomer customers and let them know that I will help them with that new app or that new form that we have online. But most importantly, echoing some of the other panelists, collaboration is key. My partner in the field is a baby boomer gentleman, and he sees things through a very different lens than I do. But I work with him every day, several times a day, and we're able to tackle the same problem in different ways and have different successes come from that. So by working hand in hand with him, I've seen a lot of successes.
Stephanie, would you like to add anything?
Yes, I'd have to agree with Lindsay that it's important to embrace different perspectives within the workplace. I think that it's important to understand that we all come from different backgrounds, which have shaped our individual perspectives. And because we each see things in a unique way, we all have something to learn from each other, no matter the generation that we come from. Differences in generations within the workplace have contributed to valuable learning and teaching opportunities in my experience. I am often learning through, like George said, listening to technical knowledge that's shared from more experienced employees. I also find myself listening and learning how to communicate with clients and the importance of jargon and word choice in professional situations from my older fellow coworkers. I also have had the opportunity to leverage my technical support capabilities as Julie and teach others software skills that I learned in school that the older generations may not have the knowledge in. And learning and knowing these software skills has opened up job opportunities for myself because I have this expertise that others may not have.
Thanks, guys, for that insight. So we understand the negative impacts of multi-generational teams that don't invest in finding a platform of respect. And this results in turnover, absenteeism, reduced productivity, and maybe even legal costs. But if we properly leverage a multi-generational workforce, it can be a true competitive advantage. So Forbes published an article last year stating that the wide range of ideas, knowledge, and skills from a broad team can serve the company well and help employees excel in their work. Successful teams seek and leverage the benefits of shared beliefs and attitudes towards work, and tapping into such mutual characteristics and motivators will result in a more engaged employees and yield better business results. So everyone must lead. They need to lead themselves without supervision, lead peers, lead upward by asking the right question of their boss and not delegating problems upward. And we need to learn from one another. We've heard a lot about mentoring and reverse mentoring, and the most powerful kind of mentoring is reciprocal. So let's go back to our panelists. And Leslie, can you talk to us about how a multi-generational team has positively impacted your role, your career, your organization? Leslie, you might be on mute.
I am. I was just talking away. I was answering the question by stating that a multi-generational team really has had huge positive impact on my organization, primarily by helping keep things current. Kudos to the younger members of my team who really have had a positive influence. They have interjected new ideas, new different ways of thinking about things, new approaches. And so by having the whole team be more open to those new approaches, we've embraced change. And with that change comes a little uncertainty. But I think that is a way that our organization has grown and has stayed relevant to our customer base, which, by the way, is also changing. Having that sort of an atmosphere encourages new ideas that span all generations, and I think that enables us to get the best out of the entire team.
Thanks, Leslie. Wanda.
Well, I see my role more as a mentor now, and I think it's our responsibility to be mentors and to be role models. I know when I came into engineering, there were no women role models. So I'm delighted that I can serve as one for others and help others develop their career. I also think it's important for my generation to communicate the value that we bring to a project just by virtue of the years of experience that we have. We must communicate the value of having someone who's weathered the storms and can impart that knowledge. But I love hearing from younger people in the organization. There's a lot that we can learn from each other. If we surround ourselves with people like ourselves, we'll just be stagnant.
Well, speaking of hearing from younger folks, Stephanie, would you share your insights with us?
Yes. Being surrounded by people with more experience than myself, I find is very motivating. It keeps me always striving to learn more and to always try to challenge myself and step outside of my comfort zone. And when those experienced coworkers help me gain experience, it makes me feel supported in the development of my career and confident in the technical knowledge that I'm gaining, which has been key to my professional growth.
Thank you. And then George, could you share your perspective with us?
I'd be happy to. In fact, I want to talk about one part of my business, which was to expand our influence outside of North America while keeping and satisfying customers inside North America. And I want to reinforce what Leslie said first, and that would be to harness the dynamics of all of your team members. That is, make sure you listen and respond. And secondly, Wanda brought up a good point. For me, the tech savvy was the weakest part of my repertoire, my resume, and I had a few, if not many, younger folks who took me under their wing and taught me a lot about how to use and utilize the data that I had access to. And then finally, in Asia, Europe, Africa, and Oceania, I had to learn from the locals what the market was like and what people needed. And most of them focused squarely on the job. They were much younger than I was, and still today offer assistance, guidance, and information to me on an as-needed basis. So I guess the final chapter, so to speak, is at ASTM, and we'll talk just a second or two about that. It's been my goal from the very beginning as chairman of D8 to get as many folks involved. And I don't mean just attend meetings. I mean take a true interest and support the process to bring to the table spectacular and new standards that raise the bar for everyone.
And George, we actually have a question for you. One of our viewers / listeners would like to know how would you recommend young women engagement as an advocate or a mentor?
Both. I think that if I understand the question correctly, all of us bring to the table attributes that others are lacking or not quite as good at. So if you learn from a younger person the technology that exists today, which I didn't have an opportunity to learn when I was growing up in my profession, perfect. And if you learn from older folks history and or previous mistakes, you can't help but win. So I guess it doesn't matter whether you're teaching, mentoring, or learning. It's all a matter of communication and improving the process.
Thanks, George. Moving on, our next our next slide's kind of funny, but if you ever watched The Intern with Robert De Niro and Anne Hathaway, Robert De Niro's character paints a needed picture of the desire of older leaders to contribute to a team and a mission. Anne Hathaway's character reminds us that being a workaholic isn't necessarily a desirable path either. That way we can work together to undo our work personally and professionally. In The Intern, we learn that age is not a restriction to becoming a linchpin. While leading and serving on a multi-generational team is certainly not easy, the difficulty is most certainly worth it. We're better for it when we have a diversity of ages on our teams. So I'd like to ask the panelists if you can share your best practices on how to manage a multi-generational team. Let's start with Julie McDonald.
Hi. So one best practice that we implemented in our company, because we did have a multi-generational workforce, but we are a small business, so I think it had a bigger impact on us than maybe a larger organization, is that we did the personality assessment. We each did the Myers-Briggs survey and kind of identified communication styles, which we also realized weren't necessarily generational, but more personal preference and personality. So if you overlook the generational aspect, just, and take it down to a person by person case, the personality assessments like Myers-Briggs can be really a useful tool in understanding how your team is going to work well together. Another best practice, particularly in our company, is we implement a mixture of communication types. We use group text. We, use the like button on our group text to acknowledge receipt. But our owner is also always telling our millennial admin, pick up the phone and call when we're trying to do invoice collection. So, a mixture of text, phone calls, and also face-to-face meetings is healthy. And then just finally ask questions for feedback. When I'm teaching or training my younger staff members on a topic, I forget, okay, I know what I'm doing and I can spout everything off. And so then I pause and I say, did what I say make sense? Do you need me to repeat anything? Slow down, and I give them an opportunity to ask questions. And that goes both up and down. So those are just a mixture of our best practices.
That was great, Julie. Thank you. George, how about you? George may be on mute. Julie Palmer?
Sure. So we've said this throughout the whole webinar, open communication, bringing in one another when you're stuck, that's important for working with anyone. But most importantly, I would say that we need to try to set aside all of these preconceived notions that we have about another generation when you're working with someone. If you pigeonhole someone before they can share their perspective on a point of view or a problem, then we're not really listening to them.
Thanks, Julie. Leslie, do you have any input?
I do, but I'm going to be preaching to the choir, it seems, and sounding like a broken record. But communication, I think all of the panelists have touched on that today, that communication is very important. And to that, listening. I think one of the best practices we have on my team is to make sure that every team member feels like they're heard and that they're able to express themselves, their opinions, their thoughts in a way that's most comfortable for them. And you can do that by making everybody feel valued and safe to state an idea. You don't want people to feel like they're judged or pigeonholed, as Julie just said. You want people to not feel that they're being dismissed, either because they're the youngest and maybe they think people won't value their idea, or they're the oldest and people may not value their idea. You want to make sure that everybody has the space in the room to express their opinion and to be heard and respected. And I think in doing that, you'll get the most creative results out of your team.
Thank you. We actually have another question that came in that I think George, Wanda, and Leslie would all be great to chime in on. Being that we work in a male-dominated field, sometimes women feel they need to approach men as mentors. Is there a way to do this to ensure that it's perceived as professional and not something else? Leslie, would you like to start us off with that?
Sure. I've had both male and female mentors, and I think the way that I approached it with my male mentor was just to head into it in a very professional manner, stating, this is what I hope to gain out of this mentorship relationship, that I wanted to learn as much as I could. I always went in prepared with an agenda. It was very professional and business-like, whereas I think with my female mentors, it's been a little more casual. So I would just say be prepared and just go into it setting expectations right up front.
Wanda, do you have anything to add?
I do. I thought that answer was excellent, Leslie. And I saw that you have a mentoring toolkit on the website. And I took a look at that, and I thought it was great. And I thought, what a great tool to have it all laid out for you there, and everybody knows what the expectation is. So I think something like that would be a great tool to use.
Thanks, Wanda. Jennifer, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I think we were going to see. George, are you still on the line?
Yes, I am.
Great.
Yes, I'm here.
Wonderful. So I guess we wanted to just follow up and ask both you and Wanda, what advice do you have for the younger women in our industry?
Well, if I can go first, I've already mentioned this once before. I think we should try to listen and engage the other person. There's no question that listening, Julie mentioned it, I know others have, if you don't listen, you can't communicate effectively. And then finally, the feedback. After listening and after discussing, give feedback to your colleagues and to your friends and to your team members. Remember, this is a team success, and it's a team effort. And without that sort of pulling all together, the likelihood of success is certainly less. And then finally, and I mentioned this once before as well, we have to make it fun for each other. You spend a lot of time working at your job. Let's try to make it fun. Everyone can enjoy it, and everyone can be more successful if they enjoy what they do.
Thank you. How about you, Wanda?
Well, I think getting a mentor is very important. And just asking for someone to be that mentor, finding someone who can serve as a role model for you, and to not be afraid to speak up, to let your knowledge and your opinions be known, and know your value, that you are a valuable part of the team, and that you contribute just as much as everyone.
Thank you. So this last question that came in, I think applies to pretty much everybody on the panel here. They're looking for advice for a time when you've been discriminated against because of your age. And I think at different points in our career that could hit all of us. So if you guys would be interested in sharing a perspective?
This is Wanda. Sadly, the Supreme Court ruled yesterday that you can discriminate on the basis of age for a new hire. You can't discriminate on the basis of age if you're currently hired. And I found that to be, from my own experience, true, that people do discriminate because of age. And I think it's important for us to make it known and to react, and not accept it as a norm.
This is Julie Palmer. If I could just jump in. I work in outside sales, so I'm going into roofing distributors or a contractor's office daily. And being a millennial woman, I have two strikes against me when I walk in the door sometimes. And so what I do again is just embrace the positives about the millennial stereotype, and then I try to disprove the negatives when it comes to being assumed that I'm lazy. So I end up being their technical support. I end up being their workhorse because I'm trying to let them know that all of those preconceived notions that they have about my generation doesn't necessarily apply to me. And so it is unfortunate that, again, by being a young woman walking into an office, I'm already looked at in a different way than my counterpart as a male baby boomer. But every now and again, it at least gets them having a new conversation. I'm not who they're expecting in their office, so it's disrupting their expectations, and I'm able to at least jolt a conversation that way. So, it's hard, but it's something that gets everybody talking.
This is Lindsay. I'd love to chime in off of that. So when I started working at GAF, I was in R&D, and I was the only girl and the youngest. So definitely felt that, a little bit discrimination. But I think the way that I tackled being able to do that is to be really direct with what you want out of your experience or your job or a project and what you're going to contribute, and also embracing the fact that you're a little bit different, or maybe you're the oldest or the youngest, because then it'll maybe stick in everyone's heads because you are a little bit different than everybody else.
This is Julie McDonald. To echo on some of that, and maybe Stephanie and Lindsay experienced this. When I was a 22-year-old field engineer just out of college, I was working for a large general contractor. And very quickly in the first year, all the superintendents recognized that I had a knack for getting punch lists done. And I think it was because I had a different way of approaching the trades. I was friendly. I was, I was personable. I didn't bark orders at them. And so I think that, a younger person entering the workforce is going to have, like we've said and echoed, a different lens, a different voice, a different approach. It catches them off guard. And I was very successful at getting punch lists done. So then the supers would start pawning off their punch list on me. But the point is that it's not always a deterrent to just be the new guy in town. And but there is definitely still discrimination in the workplace. As I think it was Julie said, 2 strikes or 1 strike or 3 strikes, and whatever the case may be. This is Stephanie. I'd like to also chime in as well. One of the most interesting pieces of advice I have received so far in my career is that at the start of your career, this is the only time in your life where you're really expected to know nothing. So as long as you work hard and demonstrate your work ethic and let that speak for itself, then I think it's pretty easy to be successful and to gain respect in that way.
This is Leslie. I just wanted to add that I think it's important as whether you're the youngest person or the oldest person, to try to figure out what your culture is of your organization or your group or your company, and then try to portray or evoke some of those characteristics that fit within that culture. I think we're talking about generational differences a lot, but on one of the earlier slides, we talked about how different generations you may have qualities of a different generation than the one in which you were born. So if your corporate culture is one that values individuality and creativity, then even if you're a traditionalist, you could exhibit, the part of you that speaks to that. So I think that would help to make feelings of discrimination and being, treated as an outsider a little less if you try to, through open communication and understanding the corporate culture, demonstrate those pieces of the culture, not stepping outside of yourself and acting not like yourself, but demonstrating those parts of the culture that would help you fit in, and then that takes the onus off of being the youngest or the oldest, because you're all just pitching in to move the company forward.
Thank you, Leslie. This is Ellen Thorpe, again, the Executive Director of National Women in Roofing. Thank you so much to our panelists today for their preparation and their participation. I'm sure you all can hear that a lot of thought and discernment went into these topics and how to answer these questions. I'd also like to say thank you to the National Women in Roofing Education Committee for putting together today's discussion. And we're at time, but I do want to take a minute and just mention a couple other things. I mentioned at the top of the webinar that RCI is National Women in Roofing's first affiliate member. And if you're looking for technical education, the RCI convention is a great place to do that. There is tons of hours of education all about roofing and the building envelope and interfaces between those two, and that it's just a fantastic source of technical education, both at their national convention and also at their education that they offer throughout the year. I also wanted to give a plug for National Women in Roofing Day, February 9th in Nashville. We would love to have you join us. It's the day before the IRE starts. We will be having another presentation at the IRE, similar in topic to this one, but more featuring contractors. And that will be facilitated by Jennifer Keegan and also by Jennifer Stone, who is the upcoming chair of National Women in Roofing. If you have not renewed your membership recently, or if you haven't joined, membership in National Women in Roofing is $60 a year. And you can access that through our website, nationalwomeninroofing.org. We also have recently launched a new member database, and we'd like all of our members to update their profiles. And you can access that also through the website under membership and then under update your profile. Other education offerings that National Women in Roofing have put together are available on our website. All of our previous webinars are recorded, and this webinar will also be posted up there within the next couple days. We've got several upcoming topics in the next year from the National Women in Roofing Education Committee. It's currently developing its roster of additional topics for 2019. If there's something that you think would be a great subject for a webinar, please contact us using the Contact Us page on the website. So again, thank you so much to our presenters and panelists for today. If you have additional questions, there were a couple questions that came in that we will be posting on the National Women in Roofing LinkedIn page, and so you can follow the conversation there. You can contact us at any time through the website. Thank you for your time, and hope to see many of you at National Women in Roofing Day, and as well as at the IRE and RCI conventions. Take care. Bye now.